All right, so we're back here again. So we'll continue our discussion of learning theories, right? So we'll start with one of the big daddies that we'll call differential association. And so the thing is that there are a few things that keep in mind to sort of set, there's sort of like ground rules that we sort of expect are the main components of this theory, right? So first and foremost is that, we learn behavior, right? So while there are some things that are innate in us, right, so that we know how to breathe, we know how to drink water, we know we thirst, we crave food, some stuff is like a maternal instinctual stuff. Most of the behavior when we're talking about crime and stuff is learned, right? And so, where do we get this behavior then, right? Because sometimes we learn from our own observations, we can see what's going on, but we largely learn it through interaction with other people. At least this is what the theory says, right? So it's this interaction with other people, right? And so the key part here is that we learn this through socializing. So when we think about socializing, right, really big ones that come up in mind that are related to this, are going to be stuff like your parents or your family. This is going to be school, could be, people in your neighborhood, could be peers or friends or something like that, right? So we learn, different things by interacting with other people. And the most, powerful learning, so powerful, is with your intimate groups, which is, not I guess it could be in a partner setting, but it's really talking about people that you most closely associate with. And that's going to be, again, family, peers, and so on, right? So with respect to criminality then, what you end up learning over time is that you are learning not only you learn the actual behavior, right? So, what it means to kill someone, you observe it, you see it, and so on. You also learn the benefits of it. So why would one want to kill someone? Why would you want to steal something? What are the perks of, dumping your toxic waste into a forest and killing all the trees and stuff like that, right? But you also learn the motivations and the drives for doing it, right? So this isn't something that you're sort of just born into knowing or whatever this, but through your observations, your interactions with other people, that may be the case, right? So and this can apply to you guys ever watch Intervention, right? So you see people shoot up heroin and they're like, yeah, a friend introduced me to it, right? I had a really bad oxy a really bad oxy addiction. It got to be too expensive, and someone introduced me to mainlining heroin, and now I've never looked back, right? But it's a very common theme, and that was from a friend, right, who shared an addiction. It was nah, you need to try this Mexican black tar or this China white or whatever, right? So that is interesting, right? And so, but what modifies this, right? So if we're learning these different behaviors, what's going on, it's going to matter. It's sort of dependent on how frequent you interact with other people, how long, so the duration, how important they are, so what kind of priority we give these different lessons, and how strong the lessons are, right? So this seems very good so far. We're sort of understanding the theory, okay, these things make sense if I have repeated exposure or if it was really intense or if it was over a long period of time. Those lessons are thought to be more important and they're going to be more impactful in your life, right? So that's kind of what we're learning, right? So we also learn, of course, it's learned like everything else. There's nothing special about criminal behavior that should be different from any other behavior, so it's learned like something else. Maybe you practice, you get it, and so on, right? And you also learned, this is oftentimes is derived from personal experience. So something that you've been through before, or that someone, or perhaps you learned vicariously, Who knows? All right. Point being is that it is something like that, right? So something else that ends up here is that you also learn, like the key thing is here is that you learn like these, definitions favorable to committing crime, which is just a really dumb way of saying that I learned why I wanted to commit crime because of beliefs, because of these beliefs, because of my willingness to learn like different techniques and stuff like that, right? That's really what we're saying, right? So, it has this focus on that's how it works. So let's use this in like a bit of an example, right? So, the thing is that this theory is often used for using juvenile crime. So, like, I'll give you an example, right? So, in peers, and why is that the case, right? So, if you think about these young kids, right, and they see, they're these little tots, right? They're hanging out with each other. They're playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards or something like that. Who knows, right? And they see someone over here, Mr. Green Dude, who, for whatever reason, has this Yu-Gi-Oh card, right? And we'll draw it in his hand. And he's like, yeah, look at me. This is my Blue Eyes White Dragon, right? Y'all don't know what I'm talking about. You got some Googling to do. Watch it. Hopefully you enjoy. If you do know what I'm talking about, you judge me. I don't really care. If you know what I'm talking about, great, because then the joke is like better, right? So in this then, right, you could have, if we're thinking about this person right here who has this Yu-Gi-Oh card, there could be item number 1, right? He's like, oh man, really cool Yu-Gi-Oh card, but then when he interacts with number persons 2 and 3, a different story emerges, right? So maybe they're paired up and they want to work on him, and they're like, hey, this is an opportunity. Actually, instead of Yu-Gi-Oh card, I should have said like a holographic Charizard, which was like the coolest thing when I was in elementary school. Of course, now I think they're just called foils or something. I still like holographic Charizard. That's what we called it. So I don't think, foil Charizard makes sense. Like Charizard makes sense. It would not be holographic. Anyway, so this is like an opportunity, number 1, right? Thing 1 in this case, right? Because we have this card. We can say, hey, we feel good because we're cool, right? And who doesn't want to be the coolest kid at the playground, right? You get some attention. Maybe people are willing to give you a little extra candy when they want to deal with you or something like that. I mean, like, who knows, right? Like, anything's possible. And so they're like, we probably won't get caught. Because we're out on a playground, like Mrs. Smith Ms. Smith is over there. We don't really like see her like very often. Like who really cares, right? We're probably gonna get caught, right? So and you know what, like if we team up, so there's this partnership, we can get this kid. And, we just have to, we'll do our approach, so we'll do step 1, walk up and state our business. Hey, we want this card. Step 2, get close, intimidate, because, up at this point, right, we can just say, hey, we were just playing, Miss Smith. Like, we're all good friends here, right? Why would we do anything? So it's about covering our tracks, right? And then step 3, if necessary, maybe to steal. Although if he's put up a fight, it's kind of a problem. Or step 4, we get physical and take it, right? If we were even darker, maybe we keep intimidating him to keep bringing their Pokemon cards or something like that. And so we can keep taking them over and over again. So we're using intimidation factors, right? So what happened in this scenario, right, on number 1, right? So we learned all this different stuff that he was not aware of, right? Like, hey, I could do this. I could not get caught. If we team up, we're stronger, right? This feels good. learn through all these other things, right? You're probably not going to get caught, maybe this guy, you know what? And maybe you learn how to neutralize it a little bit. You're like, this is like a punk kid who makes you feel dumb in social studies anyway, right? Or something like that. I got his case in math, but social studies, he makes you look like a fool. So in this then, what we end up finding then is that in the situation, right, because we have these intimate peer associations between these kids, because they're friends, right, they're learning techniques, right, so it's strategies of what we're going to do. It's spreading and contaminating because these are friends, right, they've probably frequently done this. And you know what, they're going to experience it and learn what worked, what did not work, and how they can modify their strategy in the future. They may later find out ooh, this would be really good if we adapted to XYZ or something like that, right? Point being is that all of this shows a learning process of what's happening. Now, the other key part here, right, is that this is just, part one right here, right? So this is just part one because you know what? If these kids come in again, they could easily come through and say, hey, that was just orange kid. What about, or that was green kid. How about orange kid? And if we do it to orange kid, right? We could do it to yellow kid. Or we could do it into this weird gray color kid, whatever, right? Point being, we could just keep doing it and over again. Now, a different aspect of this though is, what happens if you get caught though, right? So why would this explain why someone keeps reoffending, right? So, one explanation could be is that you build up experience and knowledge. And so what works, what doesn't work, in your situation, if you keep repeating it, right? What to expect, what doesn't work. So if something goes wrong, so if this goes wrong, there are a couple pathways that are present to you. So pathway one is, well, never do that again. If you get caught that first time, maybe think you're always going to get caught. And you just don't think, hey, it's really worth it, right? And maybe not a good way to, keep doing this. I got in trouble with my parents. It was really bad. Pathway two says, ooh, I got caught. And you know what? This ends up being a situation where, I learned what I did wrong and I learned from my mistake. And reoffend again. So, that part is particularly important, right? Is that if we learn from these mistakes and we reoffend again, right, and be getting caught, then that's how someone can keep offending over and over again. Of course, at the same time, right, you could also, ooh, a little dark purple here. We could also say that this person doesn't know anything else, or was always going to be, knows nothing else, and continues to reoffend. So that would be reasons why people keep committing crime over and over and over again, right? But this isn't always good, and we start thinking about how do we test this, right? Because if we start testing are people learning this criminal behavior, which ones matter more and stuff like that. There's different weights we have to consider, so this is not something that's very clear, especially when you figure out what is a definition, favorable, which we've already discussed is sort of some weird nomenclature, right? It's also a bit circular because it's well, how did you learn this? Well, I learned it, I kept doing it because I learned it. I learned this because I learned it, right? That's sort of the answer to everything. And so while it's true that people really never stop learning, it does create a problem where it's kind of circular. At the same time, right, how do we test something like this, right? A learning process and this led to crime. This theory as it's presented, again, not in a psychological setting, call this as sociological. Do we look at, did this person have peers? And were they delinquent peers? Is this coming from home? Is there, other examples? And why do some people reoffend, why some people not, right? So why do some people offend and not? Or if we start thinking more about correlates and stuff, crime, like how does this explain correlates of crime? So if we assume that crimes are more likely to occur in certain parts of a community, what exactly does that look like? How does that work? And what problems could we, face and emerge over time? Excuse me. So that's sort of like the core ideas here. I think, a lot of the ring supplements of what you talked about, but we'll